One of the best decisions I ever made in life was to move cities, to find a slower pace of life and a close-knit community. This simple decision has unlocked countless benefits, including working part-time, starting a business, raising kids, and breathing fresh air. And I made this decision because of a series of Kairos moments, a concept we've been exploring in our last few lessons. I mean, you might be facing a big decision yourself: where to live, what to study, or what to do with your career. But how do you make these complex decisions? And what might be the role of intuition or Kairos moments in shaping your choices? So we've been talking about Kairos moments, which is an ancient Greek term for time, which describes a significant moment in time, a serendipitous experience that can shape your thinking and therefore change your behaviours. When we have a big decision in life, how do we bridge the gap between where we are now and where we want to be in the future? How do we make the hard decisions, particularly when it's emotional or when we feel stuck? On the one hand, there's logic and reasoning. I love books like Decisive by Dan and Chip Heath, which is about the science of decision making and how you might use logic and strategy in order to make wise decisions. At the same time, many of the best decisions I've ever made have also included a different form of decision making, the type of decision making that is intuitive or even spiritual, which involves paying attention to Kairos moments. It's about paying attention to those aha moments that can change your perspective and therefore change your longer term behaviours. So in this video, I want to share my personal story about how my wife and I made a decision to move cities in response to a number of Kairos moments. And heads up, there's a few wacky parts to this story, but it's my story, and I think you'll learn something from it along the way. So, where do I live now? I live in Hobart, Tasmania, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the whole world. I am biased. It's a small city, an island state at the bottom of Australia, and I've lived here now for nearly 20 years. A few months ago, I was being interviewed for a magazine article by a journalist, and she asked me an interesting question. She asked, "Why did you choose to live in Tasmania?" And my immediate intuitive response was, I didn't choose to live in Tasmania, Tassie chose me. But let me pause and go back a few years to set some context from when I was a physiotherapist. So I was young, I was single, I'd been travelling Europe and the Middle East by myself and had returned back to Adelaide, which is my hometown, and I was asking questions about where I was meant to live longer term. And then one night, quite randomly, I actually had a dream, like a dream. And I don't normally remember dreams, but this was quite significant and vivid. I remembered it, and so I wrote it down because I thought it might be a Kairos moment. So in this dream, I was working as a physiotherapist. I was in uniform and I was driving to work, but the place was unfamiliar to me. On the right, there was a large snow-capped mountain, and then in front of me, there was an English street sign, but it was different than the street signs in the city where I lived. And that's it. I woke up. And I had this, this gut feel that it was a bit of a sign for where I was meant to live longer term. And because of that, I suppose I remembered it. I know this sounds a bit strange because it was just a dream, but I started to think about where the dream might be. It wasn't England because I've lived in England and the street signs were different. And it wasn't Europe because the trees and the mountains looked different. So I actually just thought it might be New Zealand. And so I started to investigate what it might look like to move to New Zealand to become a physiotherapist. Now, in the end, I didn't move, partly because the visa was difficult, but mainly because I met my future wife and she was a good reason to stay. But this idea percolated, it just sat there for the future. Okay, now fast forward a few years and I was now married to my wife. We lived in the UK, having traveled for a number of months through Southeast Asia. And we were super sick of just moving from place to place. We really hungered to have a home and to settle down and to put down our roots somewhere where we could actually make an impact and make a difference with our skills. I mean, this may sound strange, but my wife and I had always assumed we would live in a big, difficult city somewhere in the 2/3 world. I'm not sure why we felt so convinced about this, but I think we felt that we needed to actually live somewhere difficult in order to make a difference with our lives. And we tried a number of places. We moved to Phnom Penh in Cambodia and tried to settle there, but we soon realized that we just weren't cut out for the place. It wasn't where we'd survive, it wasn't home. But then every time we looked at other ideas, they just didn't seem to work out. And increasingly I felt confused and restless and really ready to find a city to call home. Not just a place where I could live, but also somewhere where we could use our skills to impact people's lives. And it took a Kairos moment to shake my strange thinking and to give me better perspectives. It's not that we weren't using our brains. I mean, I'd spent heaps of time journaling, doing pros and cons, coming up with options, talking with different people, thinking about ways in which I could make a wise choice. But the more I reflected, the more I ended up in analysis paralysis, unable to make a decision because it was so emotional and it felt so big. And there was one night, we were living in Birmingham in the UK, and I just remember going for a long walk in the middle of the night, kind of ranting to myself, talking a bit to God, and actually saying, why can't we work out where we're meant to be? And out of the blue, I had this most unusual experience where an idea popped into my head, and it wasn't some type of mystical voice, it was just a new idea that didn't seem to be from me. And the thought went like this: go and live in the city that you would enjoy living in the most. Now, I know that's not a radical idea, find a place to live where you want to live, but it was a real change in thinking for me. And immediately I answered by saying, well, that place would be Hobart, Tasmania. We'd been there before, it had green trees, it had beautiful people, it was by the sea, it had everything. And it had felt like home when we had travelled as visitors. And so I changed my mind. The Kairos moment changed my mind, and I realised rather than live in a hard place where we felt we could make a difference, or maybe we could make a difference in a place we love to live. And so I spoke to my wife, and she was already there. I think she'd worked it out a few months before that we were meant to move back to Australia. And after making about 2 phone calls, I had a job, we found a community, we found a house, and within a few weeks, we had our plane tickets booked to relocate to Hobart, Tasmania. It all fell in place, and it was exciting. Now, that was a pretty quirky way to work out that I had the autonomy to make good, smart choices about where I should live, that I should choose to live in a place that I would like to live in. And hopefully you're a little bit less messed up than I was, or maybe am still today. But it was an important moment for me, and we all have these blind spots where we have strange ways of thinking, or where we're caught up in old ways of thinking, and we need a spiritual moment, a Kairos moment, to break our schema and to help us to think in a fresh, new way. And here's the part of the story that makes me smile even today. It was about a month in. I was working in a hospital in Hobart. I was driving to work, and I turned a corner, and all of a sudden I saw the exact same picture that I saw in my dream. There was the same street sign, there was the same snow-capped mountain, which is Kanunyi, which is near my house in Hobart. I was wearing the same uniform that I was wearing on the way to work in my dream. And I was like, wow, this is where we're meant to be. It was this amazing experience where I realized that through a whole lot of unknown, wondrous, divine experiences, we found the place to go home. And it was super encouraging. And since then, we've hopefully been able to make something of a difference using the skills that we had in a place that we enjoy living. Now, this is a random story, it's my story, and it's certainly not the one I expect you to replicate. Not everyone needs a crazy dream or some type of rant in the middle of the night to work out where they should move next. But I think the principle of paying attention to the spiritual data in our lives and allowing those strange coincidences or those unusual moments to guide choices can be very encouraging. And if we're willing to pay attention, they can actually be quite awe-inspiring. And there is just not enough awe and wonder in our world. There is data that lies in the everyday. And there is something wonderful when we pay attention to everyday, ordinary experiences that can have a greater significance than ourselves. This same type of thinking has helped me in business, it's helped me in family life, it's helped me as an author. It has helped me just navigate the complexities of adult life when I feel stuck and find it hard making decisions with my own rational thinking. So don't throw away thinking and logic, but do pay attention to Kairos moments. Because if you make space to slow down and think about the meaning of your life, you can discover something that you hadn't seen before. And then maybe you'll have your own stories to tell, somewhat wacky stories to tell at parties about how you ended up moving to a particular place or making a particular decision based on the aha moments that you paid attention to along the way. So I'd love you to share your own aha moments, your own Kairos moments with me, your experiences of living not just in chronos or TikTok time, the time of busyness where we go from one thing to the next, but the ability to pause and slow down and live in what we call Kairos time. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And of course, please subscribe to my channel. It encourages me and it helps me know the types of videos that have been encouraging to you. And of course, I'd love you to join me for my next video, which is about navigating the tapestry of life. But until next time, make space.